This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you?
Boring. 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 Boring.
You got his word. Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what we're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
I call again for immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
Good day to you wherever you are in the world. I'm Len Topic, and this is Len Topic Live on Unprecedented TV. First of all, a big thank you. The numbers keep going up. We really appreciate your support because that is the lifeblood of free speech. We consider ourselves to be free speech central, and we don't want to beat the mainstream media. We want to be the mainstream media, and that starts with a healthy dose of honesty, insight, and opinions too. I welcome yours. I got told off by some viewers I met at the weekend because I don't respond enough to the chat. Objections sustained. I shall do my best to try to keep an eye on the chat and get my team to highlight those aspects of the chat that should be mentioned during the program. So do please continue to raise your points during the show and afterwards on my X as well. So there you are. There's feedback, and also I'm very pleased to meet viewers of the program and of our other programs too. Remember, we're increasing our stable of output, and Basil Valentine promises me he's going to be regularly on air from next week as well. Somebody else who's joining us today, he's going to have a regular spot where you get to see the programs that he puts out 6 days a week here on Unprecedented TV. More of him in a minute. What are we discussing today? Well, we're discussing a very dark subject in a way, the true number of deaths in Ukraine on the Ukrainian side. A chap called Colonel McGregor claims 1.8 million adult males have died as a result of the failing attempts by Volodymyr Zelensky to do the bidding of his masters, namely the West, in trying to repel the Russians from his territory. We'll discuss a little bit, once again, why this war is happening in Ukraine. But here's the thing. That amounts to 13 or 14% of the male adult population of the whole of Ukraine. A price worth paying? I don't think so. I think that this war was doomed from the start. I didn't think that Ukraine could ever win it when they have a professional comedian and a very amateur politician in the form of Zelensky at the helm. He has no qualification for being commander-in-chief, and he's rather proved it with some really, really badly judged military initiatives, which have simply led to multiple deaths, by which I mean tens of thousands of deaths for no military advantage. In addition to that, my opinion is this war was actually prompted by the West, not by Russia. You won't hear that in the outgoing mainstream media. But it's quite clear, right back in 1990, 35 years ago, James Baker, who was speaking officially on behalf of the United States of America, put in writing the pledge that the Americans and NATO generally would not move, and I quote him, 1 inch to the east, by which he was promising the then premier of Russia, of Soviet Union, and that is the late Mikhail Gorbachev, that should the Soviet Union disband, the West would not take advantage of it and would not try to encircle Russia with the NATO allies. Unfortunately, that promise has been completely and utterly broken. And the last straw, it seems to me, for Vladimir Putin was the encroachment into Ukraine, once a very significant nuclear power within the Soviet Union, where NATO and foolish politicians in Europe, in my opinion, including Keir Starmer, keep saying that Ukraine has to join NATO. Well, Vladimir Putin has reacted to that. in a completely predictable way. Indeed, Oliver Stone made a film about this some years ago, and all we're really seeing now is the ominous threat which Russia made to defend its borders being carried out now. You may disagree, of course, and you can say so. I'm very happy to hear your views on that. But fundamentally, my belief is that the West has provoked Russia. Russia is trying to defend its border, and hey presto, we have a war in Ukraine. Unfortunately for Ukraine, of course, Zelensky has proved himself completely incapable as a military leader, leading to these massive number of deaths. But are those figures correct? Who's Colonel McGregor? And why would he feel qualified to comment about this? Joining me now is somebody who always speaks from the heart and also from the basis of information. I'm glad to welcome once again the investigative journalist and military expert, Warren Thornton. Warren, it's very good to see you again. Thanks for joining us, as you often do on a Monday morning in the UK. How have you been?
Absolutely fine, thank you, Lembit. Yeah, I mean, we've been putting out these figures for quite a while, that 1.8 million had been lost. So it sounds an incredible number, and of course, Ukraine aren't admitting it, and the propaganda will try and stop that from getting out. But very, very simply, the Ukrainians admitted it a few weeks back, where they said they'd lost over 247,000 people since the 1st of January. Now, when they made that statement, that was 151 days. So 247,000, you don't divide that by 151. That works out at about 1,638 per day. If you multiply that basically by the amount of days this war's been going on, which is approximately 1,100, you get to the figure of 1.8 million. Now, this is without the bodies that have been stuffing into ovens, furnaces to burn them, so they don't have to pay out the money to the victims. And, of course, the bodies that have been buried in mass graves. And, of course, we've shown everybody the video.
Hold on. You just made a huge statement in passing, Warren. Tell me what you mean by the burning of bodies, and why would they be doing this? Just for those who may not be familiar with what you're saying. It's a pretty big statement. Yes,
very, very simply. So what happens is, Ukraine have to pay out anywhere close to around $380,000 to $340,000 for every single person that dies in this war. This was signed into an agreement that if that person died during the war, then they will pay them out. Now, Ukraine delayed that for 2 years, put it on for another 3 years, so that basically they didn't have to pay it out. Now, if, of course, that person was missing, and right at the start of the war, when the Ukrainians were dying in great numbers in Bakhmut, that's when the figures really started going up, when the ratio started going up. Ukraine lost about 10 to 1 there. 15,000 15,000 Wagner troops died there, and around 120,000 troops from Bakhmut. So very simply, what happened from there was they started disposing of the bodies. And if they dispose of the bodies, then, of course, they didn't have to pay out. Now, just take this into account for a minute, if you would. There were 6,000 bodies given back by the Russians just recently to the Ukrainians. There were 79 given back to the Russians. That shows you the disparity that's been going on. And they've obviously been burning the bodies and burying the bodies in trenches. So, of course, if the victims aren't identified, then they can burn the bodies and, of course, say that that person is missing. Right at the start of the war, when this was happening in Bakhmut, the company commanders were claiming them as missing. Therefore, the money would still go into the company commanders' coffers. This is how bad the corruption is. Of course, that money would still go into the company commander. He could then claim that money for the next 3 months.
Well, so let's go into that. And we have some fairly disturbing footage, which I'll ask you to explain the meaning of in a minute or two. But this big claim here, 1.8 million of them killed in Ukraine, is a quote from Colonel Douglas McGregor. Who is he? And if you want to see pretty detailed interviews, it's fairly available on the internet, though who knows? It's quite possible that those will eventually be cancelled because it's an inconvenient truth. Who is Colonel McGregor?
So Colonel McGregor was a former advisor to Donald Trump. So he's got many contacts and everything else. And we were, how can I put this? We were putting this out there absolutely yonks and yonks ago, saying, look, this is definitely a figure, because we've spoken to aid workers on both sides of this. Now, the aid workers always say for every 2 bodies you find, there's one you haven't found. It's either been blown to bits, it's been buried in a grave, it's been disposed of, it's been got at by animals, it's still yet to be found, or is buried under rubble. And these guys have been at it for 15, 20 years, so they know what they're talking about. So Colonel McGregor is absolutely correct. Now, not so long back, the Ukrainian ministry said they'd lost, as I say, 247,000 people in the space of 151 days. So McGregor's not got this wrong. The figure is likely to be far higher. You've got desertions. You've still got people listed as missing. So these are just confirmed dead between the sources, obviously, Ukrainian sources on the front line, Russian sources on the front line. And Colonel McGregor is pretty well informed. He's hearing this from Polish sources. He's hearing this from ministerial forces. We hear this from aid workers. We pretty much got the whole thing covered between us. And of course, yeah, go on, Blembit.
Just to interrupt you, Colonel McGregor also said, as you can see on the screen, Putin and NATO both want war. Now, I happen to agree with him. I happen to think that NATO was seeking a proxy war, and the then administration in the United States was seeking a proxy war with Russia, with the Soviet Union with Russia, the post-Soviet Union environment, to further try to encroach on Russia's power. In fact, you have been quite eloquent on this very point before, with some written testimony, which we've studied here on Lembertopic Live. I have to ask this question. Can Colonel McGregor be said to have a particular political leaning, a particular motivation to make these claims?
I would turn around and say not really, because at the end of the day, he's no longer working for Trump. He's free to express his views, and as an analyst, he's pretty spot on. I mean, there are 1 or 2 very good analysts out there, like Colonel Douglas McGregor and Brian Belletti, but they are pretty accurate with their stuff. And of course, when you have decent sources, as all 3 of us have, you're able to get accurate figures. We are being completely misled by the mainstream media, and of course the info war that America and NATO are so very good at across all forms of social media to try and keep a lid on these numbers.
You make a very important point there. You don't see Colonel Douglas McGregor being cited ever, as far as I can see, on the mainstream media. It seems to me that his take on reality simply is rejected by what you tend to get from those media outlets that, in my view, are collaborating with the warmongering West to sell a story. Or am I being too propagandist?
No, you're being absolutely factual, because they're not going to put on anybody who's actually telling you the true cost and the true horror of this war. Now, I have no great love being a former soldier myself, and having been in a war, I know what hell it is. It must be absolute pure hell to be on the front line. Now, just consider this for a second. This is the narrative that people don't want you to know. They are beating people. There are hundreds and hundreds of videos beating people. It's called, wonderfully called, conscription. They are beating people, throwing them into vans, sending them off for 2 weeks training, and then throwing them onto the front line.
Well, let's have a look at this now. We'll go to one example of this, I think. Can we just play that? Can we put it on the screen, please?
Та що ж він робить, хлопці? Ну що він робить? Та він...
So what's actually happening here? Tell us.
Yeah, so basically what this is, you can see any number of thousands of these videos across Ukraine. There's actually a bit of pushback now, because what they're doing is they're grabbing people off the street and they're throwing them into the cars, because very, very simply, they need to take them away to these training camps. These are being done by this military recruitment, as they call it, but it's actually just press ganging and kidnapping off the streets. And of course, the Ukrainians are fighting back on this. Now, they're given 2 weeks training limit. They're thrown onto the front line. They know barely nothing. They're taking and grabbing anyone they can lay their hands on. The Ukrainians just passed a law. This is why you know that our figures are correct, because they've just passed a law to mobilize over 60s in Ukraine. So anybody over
60s?
Yes. Yep. The Rada, which is the Ukrainian parliament, has just signed into law a bill which says that they can mobilize over 60. And of course, they're going to throw them onto the front line. And of course, they're just cannon fodder. And of course, they are dying in great numbers, Lembit. At the start of Bakhmut, it was 10-1. Then it went up with the silly counter-offensive that they had to about 15-1 that the Ukrainians were losing. And then, of course...
So, sorry to interrupt, they're actually dragging that person into the van?
They are, yes. This is happening all over Ukraine. This is happening to thousands and thousands of people every day. And what you have to remember is these TCC recruitment officers, if they don't capture a certain quota and put them on the front line, they themselves have to go on the front line. So this is a terrible, brutal regime. But nobody out there, the mainstream media, definitely NATO, not America, nobody wants you to know what's going on inside Ukraine because it is brutal and it is absolutely horrific.
Before we leave this video, who's filming this?
There is a chap filming it. He's just a normal Ukrainian guy. So all these videos are coming from Ukrainian men. And they've now developed a website where the Ukrainians are filming the TCC officers and literally
what
putting
does TCC stand for?
This is literally the name for the recruitment officers or the press gangers or the soldiers that will go and grab these guys off the streets. Now they've started using the police because what's been happening is they've been filming these soldiers that have been doing this and putting them on a website so that when the war is over, they can find the people who dragged their loved ones into a vehicle and sent them on the front line to be slaughtered.
This is just absolutely shocking. There's a message here as well. This isn't great quality, but can you tell us about this?
Yeah, very simply, the BBC had literally a survey. This was way back in 2023, and they came back with this survey and said it was absolutely terrible. The brutal fact is that literally when they were saying about people dying and everything else, the Ukrainians were losing anywhere between 8 to 13 men for every single Russian. Now, the BBC didn't publish this. And of course, they didn't want that getting out there. This was during just before and just after the battle for Bakhmut. Then they had the ridiculous summer counteroffensive where the Ukrainians just threw men in a desperate bid to try and grab some land. And they all died. And of course, ever since then, of course, the better soldiers have died and therefore conscripts are going onto the front line. And those numbers are climbing. Let's not forget the last exchange when Russia gave back 6,000 Ukrainian bodies and the Ukrainians tried to say, oh, no, they're just body parts and everything else. Only 79 Russians were given back. Now, that's a massive disparity.
Yeah, that's a big problem. I mean, it's an understatement, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
There's a chart which I've seen, which I think we have, about body swaps. Now, first of all, before we look at the chart, why does body swapping matter? Well, what does that tell us? It sounds, for a start, rather dark and a rather sterile way of describing the repatriation of dead bodies in both directions. But what does it mean?
Basically, so what you have is when the dead, when they die, when soldiers fall in battle, you have aid workers. Now, we know loads of these. We actually know people who are right there. Now, these aid workers do the god-awful job of repatriating the bodies back to the other side for a proper burial. And, of course, this happens quite often. So what you're looking at is a number of bodies being shifted. They meet at a certain checkpoint. Those bodies are then being moved. Someone like the International Red Cross will do it, where they actually give those bodies back to their country so they can receive a proper burial. Now, the last one, obviously 6,000 bodies were handed back to Ukraine. Now, this happens, there's a little bit of a disparity because when you're advancing forward, you are the other side are retreating, they don't have time to pick up those bodies. But anybody who turns around and says that's the reason has got it wrong, because when the Ukrainians were on their counteroffensive, when they were attacking Russia, they were losing bodies at a rate of 10 to 1. So that narrative that the West and Ukraine will try and push does not hold true. And of course, begging for arms and weapons the other day, Ukraine had to actually come out and admit a certain amount had died over that time. Now, if the figures hold true, which from every aid worker and every source we are hearing, the average Ukrainian deaths are 16.5 to 1. Now, if you multiply that by the one, you've got the 1,600 a day Ukrainians are dying. You multiply that by the amount of time this war has been going on, you come up with a figure of 1.8 million. And remember, that is without the bodies that have yet to be found and the bodies that have been buried in these mass graves out in the middle of the woods.
Okay, so let's have a look at this chart. Can you interpret that for us? It says exchange of bodies of soldiers killed during the Second World War between Russia and Ukraine. And I should explain, Second World War, that's the name that the Russians give this Ukrainian war. Is that correct?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. So what you can see at the start of the conflict, when you had the Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republic basically fighting against the Ukrainians were doing very well at the start. And they were starting to slaughter many of these militia people. Then the Russian army got involved, the proper Russian army got involved, rather than just arming the militias. And suddenly the numbers started to even out. And then bit by bit, because of Bakhmut, of course, the Ukrainian numbers started climbing. Then, of course, the counteroffensive, the stupid counteroffensive, saw the numbers, the disparity between the Ukrainians dying in the blue and the Russians dying in the pink. The disparity started to stretch out. Then we had the idiotic incursions into Belgorod and Kursk, where the Ukrainians lost 70-odd thousand men just in Kursk alone. 50-odd thousand in Belgorod. They lost 120,000 in Bakhmut, and of course another 60-odd thousand in Adiyivka. And as you can see, the disparity now with the good soldiers that have died, and that's not the sort of neo-Nazi Azov. They patrol the borders, throwing people back onto the front lines. But the conscripts are now going forward, and of course they're dying in huge numbers. The literal disparity now is about 26 to 1 at the moment.
26 to 1.
Yep.
So for every Russian that dies,
yes,
you say 26 Ukrainians are dying. If that's the case, why aren't we being told that? It's such a big difference. 4% attrition, 4% death rate for Russia compared to the 100% in those figures for Ukraine. Why aren't we being told that on the British Broadcasting Corporation, the state-sponsored station that's meant to tell us the truth, and all the other self-styled media outlets? Why aren't they telling us this? Because you don't hear this at all if you just watch mainstream.
Okay, so we're talking about 1.8 million dead. Look at the outcry that is happening at the moment over Gaza. Around about 200,000 dead. If this were to get out, if this were to be put on the mainstream media, this makes this genocide that NATO and America are backing, plus the mainstream media and all the Ukrainian propaganda and the people who are killing their own people by promulgating this lie and this war. Literally, this would be 8 times worse than the Gaza Holocaust. I mean, than the Gaza genocide. I mean, the numbers are staggering. And if this, of course, is rolled out everywhere and everybody gets to know about this, the outcry is going to be phenomenal because, let's face it, Witkoff went to see Putin. He went to try and get a deal on American terms. Now, it's quite clear Ukraine are getting absolutely annihilated in this war. America don't. Best money we have ever spent, Russians are dying. They don't care if Ukrainians are dying as well.
Now this is the problem I've got. You get the American representative for Donald Trump to go and visit Vladimir Putin. We're told that Trump and Putin get on pretty well, but there doesn't seem to be much incentive for Vladimir Putin to do a deal on American, or let's even say this almost in jest, European terms, though Europe is completely irrelevant. We'll come back to that. If all that's happening is that the killing fields of Ukraine are causing according to your figures, up to 26-1 death rate in terms of Ukraine. Why would Putin want to stop?
Well, he won't. That's just the point. And America, of course, are trying to get out with some sort of win or winning draw, which, of course, they're not. They're losing. Now, 26-1 is the current death rate. That wasn't always the case. At the start, it was very, very even. But, of course, over time, as Ukraine have lost more and more troops, that figure has expanded and expanded and expanded. Seasoned, hardened battle troops going into war are completely different from fresh-faced conscripts or people, in fact, who don't want to go to war, who've just been beaten up. Now, we have videos. We have videos of people shooting their own people. These are mass graves, of course. And, of course, you're looking at a mass grave there where they've started putting the bodies in. And you can find many of these all over. It wasn't until they started digging it. They are still finding bodies in Kursk and still finding bodies in Bakhmut, would you believe, which that battle has been over for a long, long while. But they are still finding remnants of people and bodies. And, of course, this, along with throwing them into the ovens, Lembit, is muddying the figures as well.
So dark. It's such a dark thing to learn about. There's another video which we've got, and I can't tell quite what's happening in it. We got it. Maybe you can interpret it. Also, I want to know what the source of it is. Can we play that other video that we were looking at? Yeah, this is hopefully the one. Yeah, that's it. What's going on here?
So there are 4 main ovens around Ukraine, and what they're doing is they are burning the bodies, 1, so they don't go on the death toll, and 2, that way they don't have to pay out the victims. So this is one of 4 sites that is being used literally night and day. Now, this video was sent out by a worker at the actual site. So this isn't from Russian propaganda or whatever. This was leaked out, and of course the Russians have jumped on this and shown everybody what's going on, and of course everybody else in the know jumped on it and showed everybody else what was going on. But this was sent out by a Ukrainian worker at this site, and of course he's turned around and said that there are 4 such ovens in operation 24/7 in Ukraine. Now, of course, you burn the bodies, you don't have to pay the victims, and you can hide the true cost of the death toll.
That's a pretty big statement, though. And it's got such dark connotations. But can we trust this video? This video is as incendiary as allegedly what they're doing to the bodies.
Yeah, exactly that. But you've just seen them in the mass graves as well. You've only got to listen to testimony from Ukrainian soldiers saying that the commanders, knowing that their soldiers are dead, are reporting them missing so they can claim 3 months' money for them. It is quite incredible. The level of corruption. They are literally, you've seen it yourself, the brutality of this, Lembit. They're beating people up and throwing them into vans and cars and then giving them a rifle with almost no food, no water, and throwing them on the front line to be cannon fodder. And if they try to retreat, Lembit, they're shooting them. We have videos of literally what you call barrier troops in Ukraine, that if the people on the front lines retreat, they get shot at by their own side.
What you're describing is the barbarism of the First World War.
Yeah, absolutely. This is just like the First World War. And of course, there's lots of talk about, NATO will go and put troops on the ground. NATO aren't going to put troops on the ground. America won't put troops on the ground. This is a brutal war. You have got, no, they have not been, they don't understand the language. They don't know the topography. They've never fought in a drone war. And they haven't been in trenches since the 1940s. So nobody outside of the Ukrainians and the mercenaries who are fighting there have no idea what they're walking into. Remember, they lost 120,000 troops in Bakhmut in 8 months. Now, that is the entire British army and the German army combined.
That's just absolutely shocking. And that would be because, is it military incompetence? Is there any way they could have done better from a military perspective, leaving aside any of the moral questions?
Not really, because Russians can outmatch them in terms of production. They can produce 20 artillery shells to every 1 Ukrainian artillery shell. You can see America have been scratching around the whole of the world and eventually got them off the Germans for a couple of Patriot missile battery systems. Now everybody's talking about these. Everybody talks about the new weapons like the new Wonder Weapon. Russia make better weapons. There's more of them. They've got more men. what part of that equation do you think you're going to win? And of course, these Patriot battery systems, as soon as they find them, are getting blown up. The Russian intelligence on where these things are is first class. And of course, there are Ukrainians out there who don't want a part of this war, who are also passing on all sorts of information to the Russians. So once the Russians find these areas, they're hitting drone factories. I mean, they're hitting infrastructure. They're hitting, airfields where, shall we say, some of these Patriot missiles were stored on an airfield, and literally the Russians found it. They blew it up. Sorry, let me on you.
So basically, what stuns me about the whole situation is that we've got ourselves. I certainly don't take any responsibility for it because I never agreed with our involvement there in the first place. But we've got ourselves into a war which is unwinnable, being mismanaged by a professional clown. That's his trade. Let's remember, Volodymyr Zelensky is a professional clown who had a very vulgar party piece that he used to do on stage. No military experience and no political experience, except to be an actor, to act as a politician, and then he got to be the politician. We've got an American former administration that seemed to want to see this war continue, and we've got Europe and the UK that bleat about how terrible it all is, but really haven't done anything apart from throw money into it. And I want to ask you one question about that. Why are we just bothering to pretend that we can even win?
Well, it's very, very simply. I've sent you a document, Lembit. You've seen it, I think, the RAND Corporation from 2019. You can go and read it yourself. Now, the RAND Corporation is an American, Washington, D.C. policy think tank. And that is exactly what the American policy is to extend Russia, to basically cause this war, have a war, and of course, while they can go and do other things, which they managed to do. They managed to kick Russia out of Syria. And of course, that's now gone completely by the by, and Al-Jilani's going around killing Christians like there's no tomorrow. And of course, every time America do this, their think tank policies are absolutely terrible, and that's what's adopted by the Lindsay.
Okay, we'll get Warren back in the side. There he is, back again.
Yeah, everybody is turning around and saying, what is going on here? Well, the whole idea is to extend Russia, not to defeat it. And if Ukraine die in the meantime, if Ukraine gets obliterated in the meantime, they don't care. As Lindsey Graham said, he doesn't distinguish between Ukrainians and Russians. They're all Russians as far as he's concerned. As long as they're killing Russians, the end justifies the means, and American troops are not dying. This is why Americans won't put boots on the ground, nor will Germany, nor will the UK, nor will France.
Final question, we're almost out of time.
Yep.
I've seen reports, again, not on the legacy media, not on the outgoing media, but on the media that's likely to replace it, saying that there is an absolute national scandal going on in Ukraine, which you and I have talked about before on your show, on the Warren Thornton show, indicating that we send weapons to Ukraine. Ukraine sells weapons into the illegal arms trade all over the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've had weapons that have been given to Ukraine, and you can always tell them because they've got certain markings on them. And of course, they're all listed as well. Now, these weapons have turned up in the hands of drug smugglers in Mexico and Spain. They've turned up on the front lines in Israel. They've turned up in the hands of Al-Jilani's terrorists. I mean, this is a river of. Not only that, they've been doing this with aid as well. This is a river of dirty money that's flowing through. When Zelensky turned around and said, we're taking the corruption unit under our wing, America went potty, and it was very quickly reversed because Zelensky's own person was being literally investigated by this anti-corruption unit, which, of course, is controlled by America. And, of course, the Americans went, whoa, that's our dirty money. You're not touching that. You get your whack, but don't you try and dip into our pot. Of course, the USAID is all wrapped up in this, as is the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office of the UK, which has given over 4.6 billion in shady money out.
Just to be clear, though, you're not saying that the UK Commonwealth Office and Foreign and Commonwealth Office, I'll get that right in a moment, and the USAID were actually part of the racket. They were giving the money for the racket, weren't they?
Yes, they were. But this is all. It's a nice way to hide it. I mean, do you really think when they go into, shall we say, development for various countries and everything else. This money is all out there, 240,000. I'll give you a clue. Somebody that used to receive money was Melissa Moves. Now she is Keith Kellogg's daughter. He was the very first, he was the envoy who was sent to secure this deal with Putin. Now she works for a /charity NGO, non-government organization, that repatriates the bodies of dead US mercenaries from Ukraine that were fighting against Russia back to America. And quite a few of those have been buried at Arlington Cemetery, would you believe? Now, you don't have to take my word for it. You can go and check it out. But Melissa Moves just tweeted the other day that we must stand solidly behind Ukraine and all the rest of it. And then you're sending Kellogg to support, to turn around and say, we want peace. And now Witkoff has gone. Same thing's going to happen. The Russians haven't changed what they want. They want denazification. They literally want demilitarization, and they want no Ukraine in NATO. Those three things have not changed. America could address that in a heartbeat. They don't want to, Lembit.
Finally, Donald Trump said he wanted to end the war in 24 hours. I couldn't have been more wrong in naively believing. It seems ridiculous now that I did believe it, that he might do it. You've always been much more pragmatic about it. What's the end game for real?
The end game for real is what is going to happen next. And this is going to sound horribly dark, but it is absolutely true. America will want to pass the baton over to Europe for the time being, and of course, try and secure some sort of ceasefire so that it can rearm. That's not going to happen. Putin's not stupid. He's not going to fall for it a third time, as he did with the first two Minsk agreements. Now, then America will go off. They've still got Iran to take care of. That's not finished with. And then, of course, there is this massive build-up now in Philippines and Japan, where they're getting a proxy war ready for China when they start arguing over Taiwan in 2027. And don't forget that in 2027, there will be a new, shall we say, election in Taiwan, and the pro-Chinese party will take over. And that, of course, is when America will start to act against China. And please don't forget that Taiwan is a province of China. It is not a country on its own. It's not recognized as a country on its own. It is a province of China. And China very much don't want America meddling there.
Where can we get another dose of Warren Thornton?
There's Warren Thornton. Literally, I'm on X or at warrenthornton.com at 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. on Monday to Friday. And of course, at 7 p.m., 9 p.m. on Sunday nights, where the wonderful Lembit Opik comes on the show and joins us.
Thank you very much. And just to tell viewers again, we are in negotiations to give you the chance to see Warren Thornton's program the next day after it's broadcast live as part of our offering to you in the forthcoming schedule. Big thank you, Warren. Not everyone will agree with what you said, of course, but that's the wonder of free speech. And I will get back to your comments. If you've been in the chat on the show today, apologies, I didn't get around to having a look, but you can have a chat with me on X as well. That's one of the many places you can see Unprecedented TV. There'll be other shows coming up as well. And you can always make a suggestion about something that you think we should cover. Just to summarize then, 1.8 million dead adult males from Ukraine. That's the claim of Colonel Douglas McGregor. Others may not report that. It seems credible. What we do know is the killing fields of Ukraine are not delivering a victory for Ukraine. Don't be fooled by it. I had somebody screaming at me in a public place recently, accusing me of being an apologist for Russia. I'm certainly an apologist when it comes to peace. I think that we cannot win against a great military power like Russia with a rather incompetent and under-educated, when it comes to military matters, leader like Zelensky. I just don't think it's possible. I think the only serious outcome here will be a negotiated one. Anyone who thinks otherwise, you can tell me why you think that. Have a chat with me on X particularly, or in the chat. And most importantly, do carry on drawing your conclusions on the facts, not on the propaganda that you're fed. Coming up this week, we've got some very interesting guests. And of course, as usual, we'll have Claire Dyer with Dire Consequences. and many other shows too. We filmed this live. You can see it as live in the archive, especially on YouTube. Thanks to Warren Thornton, and thanks to you for having the courage of your convictions to think for yourself. I'm Len Topic. This was Len Topic Live. I'll see you soon.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you?
Boring. 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 Boring.
You gotta work. Don't tell us what we're gonna feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're gonna feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're gonna feel.
I call again for immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages,